You mentioned the Eagles game, that we can move over to the NFC now. That is going to be a very exciting game. The Eagles have a lot of hard games coming up. They got the Niners, they got Dallas again, they got the Dolphins, I believe they got the Bills, and there might be a Seattle, I think's in there. So they've got a lot of tough games. They beat the Rams yesterday in Cooper Kupp's comeback, 23-14. I think this was the first time all season the Eagles have resembled last year's Eagles team. They've played well, like they're unbeaten, but it just goes to show how much better they can get because I have them as my Super Bowl, prediction to win the whole thing. And they brought in two new coordinators this year, which I think is at least partially why they got off to a bit of a up and down start on offense. But now it looks like everyone's kind of flowing together. I just kind of like the Jags. Early in the season, it felt like, oh, this is an A.J. Brown game. This is a Devontae game. Against Minnesota, Swift broke out. But now, the past couple weeks, it feels like everybody's getting involved. They got Goddard involved right away yesterday. And the defense actually might be their biggest problem right now. Now the offense has gotten going because their front seven's awesome, but the secondary's really regressed. It hasn't cost them a win yet, obviously, but that's a concerning sign. But other than that, I think the Eagles, well, they better get that secondary ready for Miami. But that aside, I think they're playing really well. Not as well as the Niners, but I'm still confident in the Eagles team. What's your thoughts on their outlook, especially with Dallas losing to the Niners last night in such a blowout fashion? I think they got a pretty clear leg up in the NFC East.
I would say the Eagles are pretty clearly like the front runners in this division. I think the Cowboys lost to the Niners. It was to me it was expected because I do think the Niners are by far the best team. I just think the Niners they just know exactly they're like. The Niners are what the Dolphins aspire to be. The
Yeah.
team who has all of the personnel to get it done, but they're clicking on both sides of the ball incredibly well. And I think that's the Dolphins are trying to get there, trying to do that same thing. But I think the Niners are by far and away the best team in the league. And it's a little unfair to have expected the Cowboys to do better. But considering that the Cowboys always come in, they're always Super Bowl contenders. They're always, playoff contenders. They need to play better. And they didn't. Dak was terrible.
Yeah.
He threw three picks, four turnovers from Dallas. And I think the Niners, even if they were going to lose to the Niners, they needed to keep this game closer, but they lost by 32. They got blown out. I think very
Yeah.
clearly the Eagles, as you were saying, even though the Eagles were kind of up and down to start the season, they beat the Patriots only by 5 points. They didn't do amazingly at the beginning of the season. I think this game really did help them just kind of get into their rhythm. And I just don't think any of these other teams are good enough. I think obviously Dallas is going to be knocking on the door. They're still a talented team. But I think the Eagles, unless something disastrous happens to them, they should very clearly keep their hold on the lead for this division. As much as I like the Commanders and the Giants, I just don't think they have what it takes. I mean, the Giants, especially, they're 1-4. They're one of the
Yeah.
worst teams in the league right now. So
Yeah. The Giants thing, I know Saquon's hurt, but Dable's coaching apparently can't work that magic again 2 years in a row. Their skill position guys are performing how I expected them to last year. They just can't really find any offense, and I think that makes sense. And then Commanders, they've had some really nice games, and then they've also, I mean, they just lost to Chicago by 20, and they also got killed by Buffalo. So I can't figure them out for the life of me. I know my friend Joel, my roommate Joel, he's a Commanders fan. I think even he's getting tired of Ron Rivera. We'll see how long he lasts. But I don't know. I think the Commanders have a lot of talent. Maybe it's a coaching thing. Maybe it's just inconsistencies. I don't know. But I thought they could be a wild card team this year. They're not. Dallas is very weird. I thought they were going to be, now they lost Diggs. I thought Dallas was going to be right there with the Eagles. I thought Brandon Cooks was going to be another important addition. He hasn't really done anything. I thought Pollard, he's been good, but I thought he was going to be really like just the focal point of the offense. And like you said, I think Dak Prescott has been very disappointing. I mean, I have him in our fantasy league as my QB1, but yeah, that hasn't worked out for me at all. But even put that aside, the three picks to the Niners, I mean, it just shows 49ers continue to own Dallas, and that's just not a place you want to be, especially come playoff time. Not to mention the Eagles have found success against Dallas pretty regularly over the past couple years as well. So I don't know. I think they're probably still going to make the playoffs, but defensively, they've had some great performances, but those performances were against New England and the Giants. So I don't know how great that defense really is. It hasn't shown itself against some better teams. Even Arizona, they lost. So yeah, I think the Eagles are going to pull away here. And honestly, the only two teams in this conference right now I think can win the Super Bowl are the Niners and the Eagles, but they might just be the two best teams in the league, like you said.
I would agree with you. I think it's their offense, like you're saying, especially like Tony Pollard. Watching the game last night, he didn't really do too much, which was kind of weird.
I mean, they
And
were down big pretty early, so
they
but
they they
I'm good.
were, but like I think at the beginning of the game, especially, even if you're down like 21-7, I do think you still need to put an emphasis on your best players. I like if it's fourth quarter and you're losing by that much, I understand, throw it. But if it's still the first quarter, second quarter, you need to put your best players in a position to succeed. And you have to use them. You have to figure something out. And Dak especially just hasn't played like you expect him to. And I know everyone likes to kind of make fun of Dak and the picks and stuff like that, but even though Dak, when he's good, he's a really good quarterback. He can thread the needle. He's got a big arm. He can scramble even. Like he's just way too inconsistent for this team to do anything. And I think we saw that especially last year against the Niners as well. He
Mhm.
just blew it in that playoff game. He played terribly as well. I'd say he played about the same way in this game today. It was just
Yeah,
an awful showing. And I don't know, it's very complicated. I just think the Cowboys are one of those weird teams to me. I think they also don't have the it factor that I was saying with the Chargers. It's always something. I think Jerry Jones,
another coaching situation possibly as well.
Mike McCarthy, I like, yeah, he's weird. We talked about it a little bit last year that like the more you look at it, he wasn't necessarily the root of every problem, but he still hasn't helped this team either. I
Mhm.
think Jerry Jones is too involved with like the team and like the process. I don't think he knows what he's doing with these
That's
things.
never going to change, though. It's always been that way.
No, of course, but like I think that's also like the biggest issue is that like it starts from the top at the end of the day. Like if you have dysfunction, like ownership, GM, stuff like that, things with the team are never going to work out the well. And the coach as well, like the coaching, it's also kind of up and down. So I don't know. I think the Cowboys are a weird team. They're still 3-2. I think it can't be discounted that the Cowboys typically still figure things out. I just don't think they're a Super Bowl contender, and they probably never will be at any point this season.
I agree. This year, it's the Eagles' division to lose. So we
Hmm.
talked about the Niners a bit already. I mean, there's not much more to say. They're playing pretty perfectly. McCaffrey's amazing. They got Debo, Kittle, Ayuk has taken a leap. Purdy has cemented what he did last year. It's for real. Like he's the last pick in the draft. This good. It's just how it's going to be. We were talking about this a little while back. Just kind of talking about how like everyone wants to say like Purdy, he doesn't have that talent. He doesn't have that it factor. He's just it's the scheme, it's the system. It's like maybe that's true. Maybe he truly is a system quarterback. I agree. You probably put him on Carolina, he'd probably be bad. But you just have to accept the reality is that he's going to be their quarterback. And if he's their quarterback in this system, he's going to play really well and get all these guys involved. And they're going to win games and they've dominated everyone they've played. Um, and I don't know, defensively, they're just as good, if not better than they were last year. There's not much to say. They're just winning football. McCaffrey, I think, should be in the MVP race right now. He's been incredible. I don't know if they give it to him. They love giving it to quarterbacks only, but right now I don't think a quarterback has pulled away yet. So I actually think McCaffrey should be the MVP favorite right now. And I like this division. I think Seattle and the Rams are still very much in the playoff race, but the Niners, to me, I mean, I, I think you agree, but I mean, they're the Super Bowl favorite right now.
No, absolutely. There's not too much to say about the Niners, but that's just because of just they've just been so dominant both sides of the ball. They know exactly what they're trying to do and they're doing it incredibly well. I think Brock Purdy, it's kind of interesting because I also was kind of like not concerned, but like that was always something I wondered about. Like, is he for real? Like, is he legit? And I do agree that if you put him on like Carolina, he would not be as great of a quarterback. I just think that Brock Purdy is the right guy for their system, regardless of where he's drafted, regardless of his actual skill level. He knows how to run what Shanahan wants to run, and I think that's what works to their benefit. And in that game last night, he made some pretty great throws. Like all of those touchdown passes to Kittle,
Yeah.
amazing throws. Some of the best I've seen all season. I think he's very good at threading the needle and just pinpoint accuracy. I think Seattle, like you mentioned, is an interesting team because they're 3-1. I think Geno Smith has been pretty good still this year.
Yeah.
I I don't know, like I think
I
they'll
can't
probably
quit Seattle. I can't quit them. I know they're not. I was wrong. They're not better than the Niners, but like I can't quit them. I think they're. I still think they're really good.
oh no, they are. I think a lot of people wanted to write Pete Carroll off when they had a few bad seasons and Russ left. Like they would just want it to be like, it's the coaching, he's old, blah blah blah. But like Pete Carroll, at the end of the day, like he's a Super Bowl winning coach. Like he has gotten it done before, and he did it with like a high-powered passing offense. Like this wasn't one of those like quarterbacks like Sean Payton who won back then when things were much different. Like I don't know. I think the Seahawks are good. Geno Smith has been incredible. Kenneth Walker, I mean, he's a good running back. They got Charbonnet as well. They have a great receiving core with Metcalf, Lockett, and JSN. I mean, even their defense has been pretty decent. I mean, they got Kella Witherspoon, who's been incredible so far. That's a
Devin
great dude.
Witherspoon. Devin
Oh,
Witherspoon.
Devin? I said
Yeah.
Akella. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's
Devin
okay.
Witherspoon. Devin Witherspoon has been pretty good. He's a lot of people seem to think he's the front runner for defensive rookie of the year, which is understandable. I think he's been
Well,
pretty good so
he
far.
was so he missed that first game when they got killed by the Rams, which everyone thought was a huge upset. But guess what? Like we'll talk about them in a sec. The Rams were just that good too. The thing about Seattle's defense, that's why I thought they were going to take a huge leap this year. And maybe they still will, even if they're not as good as the Niners. Like Witherspoon, he was dealing with the injury the first couple games, but he completely killed the Giants last week. He had I think the sack and the two interceptions, the pick six. So him and Tariq Woolen. And Woolen's been, not as good as last year, but I think he can get back to it. I think he's got the talent. I mean, them in the secondary, and then Wagner's back. They signed Draymond Jones. Like, I think their defense improved, and I think it will continue to kind of fall into place now that guys are getting healthier again. But offense is obviously their strength here. They're probably not going to go too far in the playoffs. I did pick them to go to the NFC title game. I don't think that's going to happen anymore, but they're a fun team. They're just very fun to watch. And unfortunately, maybe they don't, ever get back to the Super Bowl with Pete Carroll. But I think what Geno Smith has done, what Pete Carroll has done over the past 2 years is very impressive. And they're a lot of fun to watch, but it's similar to the Rams. I mean, coaching matters. We talked about it. We were talking about the Chargers. This division with Shanahan, McVay, Pete Carroll, like that's why these teams are this good because they have some of the best coaches in the league.
They also just have like consistency at the coaching position. I think a lot of people underrate what it means to just like have a good like coach to remain. Even like a good front office knows when to not get rid of a coach, and I think these teams have done that incredibly well. Like even for Shanahan, all of his faults, like not finishing in big games, he's gotten them to these big games very consistently. So there's no reason to get rid of him. Same thing with Pete Carroll. Same thing with McVay, even to some extent. I know they were terrible last year, but this year Stafford came back incredibly healthy. I was kind of concerned about that. He's getting older, and an elbow injury on your throwing arm, that's kind of a big deal when you're getting up there in age. But he's shown out this season. I think he's been incredible. I think Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp are going to be one of the best duos in the league with receiving. I think the Rams, they could sneak in a wild card spot. I think they've shown a vastly improved potential from last year.
I
I
think they
think they can
will.
sneak in. I think their defense has been pretty good, all things considered. It hasn't been as good as it used to be. Obviously, Donald's slowing down a little bit, but even with Ramsey leaving, they still haven't like the Rams are still in there. They're still figuring things out. They're doing a soft rebuild, but they're
Yeah,
kind of getting the job done better than expected.
completely. I mean, we talked about the Rams, or I guess we didn't actually get to talk about in the pod, but I think we both thought they were going to be one of the worst teams in the league. And it came down to that defense. It's like, it's just a bunch of rookies and second year guys that have proven nothing. Like, they're going to have a hard time in this division. Well, the defense has been really good. A lot of guys have broken out, stepped up. It doesn't matter that Aaron Donald is really the only proven commodity. That they're making it work. They're one of the better defenses in the league so far. And maybe that will come back to haunt them. They're inexperienced in the playoffs, but I think Raheem Morris, the job he's done as a defensive coordinator, like we already saw him do it with all the talent a couple of years ago. Now he's getting this group to play this well. I think he's going to be a head coaching candidate after the season. But like we were saying about coaching, I mean, McVay is just incredible. And the fact that like we came in this season saying Cooper Kupp and Stafford are banged up. Cam Akers, we don't know what we're getting from him. Van Jefferson, we don't know what we're getting from him. Who's the other starter? Like I don't even remember who the other projected wide receiver was, but instead it's Puka and Kyron Williams break out of nowhere. Tutu Atwell takes a step, and Cup and Stafford were healthy, and it just everything has clicked into place for them. And maybe they only go 8-9, 9-8, but I think they're a competitive team. And right now, I mean, I would take the Rams over some other teams in the NFC right now. I think they've played really well, and I think they're gonna definitely, like you said, fight for a wild card spot.
We like to write off teams because they have too many young guys, but they just still manage like some teams manage to just get it done. Obviously, for some teams it doesn't work out. With a really good coach and at least a competent front office, you can bypass like not having good experience. And I think that's what the Rams have managed to do. I think the Rams are good. I think they could sneak in a wild card spot. I don't know about the Cardinals if they can sneak a wild card spot. What do you think about the Cardinals? I don't think they're as bad as I thought they'd be, to be fair.
Yeah, it's they've definitely exceeded expectations. It's just that comes down to the same thing we were just talking about. Like maybe we just shouldn't write these teams off just because they're young and don't have the experience we want. But I mean, they trade for Josh Dobbs like 2 weeks before the season, and he's been honestly borderline above average at quarterback. He's at the very least keeping their offense afloat. And I mean, James Conner got hurt yesterday, but he was top 5 in the league in rushing coming in this week. They're just playing. They're not winning games, and I think it's a talent thing, but. I guess the thing I didn't realize was that just because they didn't have the talent, this team still has the heart and they're competing every week. They beat Dallas. That's their only win was against Dallas, which is really funny. I don't know. Gannon, I guess, is better than everyone expected him to be as a coach. I still think their defense is probably their weakness, and it's why they've only gotten one win out of this surprising start. But all the same, I don't know. They definitely have a foundation for something, and I don't know what that is. Now, I do think there's a chance they're going to come to regret not just kind of bottoming out this season and getting Caleb Williams or someone like that at the top of the draft, but maybe Kyler comes back this year. Maybe that they're just going to stick with him instead. I don't know, but I think it's very interesting what Arizona's done. Unfortunately, I don't think they mean much in the grand scheme of the season, though.
No, I would agree with that. That even though they've been very just like kind of fun to watch in a general sense, because I think they've done a good job for what we expected them. I do agree with you that at the end of the day, it's not going to be like, oh, they're going to compete for a wild card spot. No. At the end of the day, like you're saying, the defense, even though the offense, I think has shown really good like flashes of like promising young players. Marquise Brown has been good this year. Like even he's been very inconsistent player most of his career. The defense is the problem, but I think it's kind of interesting that you're mentioning Kyler Murray because it seems very up in the air what's going to happen with him. Like Kyler Murray hasn't come off the pup list yet. He hasn't come off of yeah, he's on pup.
Mhm.
And a lot of people have started to float around the idea. There's reports coming out that NFL execs think that they're going to trade Kyler Murray instead, which is interesting to me because you could get a decent haul for Kyler Murray and they could bottom out. Maybe they won't get Caleb Williams because I think there's worse teams in the league than them, but they could get a Drake May like or Quinn
Yeah.
Ewers. I don't think those are bad options for them either. So I think we could easily see Kyler Murray come back for like maybe a game or two, and then they trade him at the deadline just to some
Yeah.
team, get a huge draft haul, keep playing Josh Dobbs, kind of just bottom out more or less, and just kind of go from there.
Yeah, I think I don't know about that. I feel like if he comes back for them this season, he's at least playing for them this year and maybe, come draft night, come off season, that's when they trade him. I think if he comes back, he's playing for Arizona this year. But at the same time, I would not be surprised, like depending on how the rest of the season goes, if he's not on the team next year and they have a rookie quarterback or a new quarterback instead. I know people are gonna be like Josh Dobbs is playing well, but I think everyone knows the truth is that he's not, the face of the franchise going forward.
I do love Josh Dobbs. I think he's done an incredible job, all things considered, with like
Yeah.
what he was kind of given. So shout out to Josh Dobbs. I like him. Think he's a good quarterback. Kyler, I think it's a little unfair to Kyler because I don't think he's the root of their issues. I think kind of getting a rookie is kind of not their best plan because I think they've already kind of bottomed out. You want to establish player, especially since they signed him to a big contract, but
Mhm.
that's kind of up in the air, so that kind of remains to be seen. But it's gonna be interesting, depending on what happens with Kyler. Maybe he'll come back and the Cardinals will be incredible, or maybe
Yeah.
they'll trade him and they'll be good within the next few years. It's really very dependent on I don't know. There's just a lot of going on with them.
Yeah, they have their options. I think they've shown that at the very least they have something going on there. They're not going to go 0-17. So I apologize to the Cardinals and their fans for saying they were going to be the worst team in NFL history. I was wrong. I have to own that. So before we wrap up on the NFC here, I guess we could just briefly overview. I mean, I know I'm a Packers fan, but honestly, like I don't even really want to talk that much about them too much. But the other two divisions in the NFC, the North and the South, it feels like they're kind of up for grabs. I think Detroit has definitely pulled away, but other than that, I think they're just a lot of average teams in this bunch. The Packers to me have shown flashes. I kind of want to see them tonight against the Raiders before I make any grand claims about this Packers season because they've had a lot of injuries and they've also had some very weird games. Like Aaron Jones in week one only had 5 carries. Last week he's come back from the injury, didn't do much. They've blown a lead. They've had a huge comeback. They've blown out a division rival. They've got blown out by a division rival. Their season has been 4 different games of completely different results. Tonight, everyone should be playing. Everyone is healthy. They're playing a team they should beat. So hopefully they get a win tonight. But I don't think I think it's a little too early for me to be like the Packers are not going to make the playoffs or the Packers are going to. Like, I'm optimistic, but right now I think Detroit has definitely pulled away as the best team in that division. They killed Carolina yesterday 42-24. They beat the Chiefs week 1. So they're definitely one of the better teams. Minnesota and Chicago, I don't know. Like, I guess offensively they have potential. Chicago's unearthed something the last 2 weeks. Defensively, I think they're both terrible. So I don't think they have a playoff shot. And then the South, I don't know how you're feeling. I mean, the Saints had a big win yesterday. Tampa, they were on bye this week, but they've looked really good. They beat the Saints last week. And then Atlanta has had some really good games. They beat Houston, as I said earlier, but they've also they lost to Detroit 20-6. So I don't know. The South to me is going to come down to like week 18. And then our division, I think the Packers maybe can rally and compete for a wild card, but to me, Detroit pretty clearly the best team.
Yeah, no, the NFC North, I would say Detroit, as you said, very clearly in the front seat with this whole thing. I think the Packers, like you're saying, if they can kind of get their footing easily, not easily, they could be competing for a wild card spot. So I think that's important to note and something important to monitor with the Packers going forward. I think the Bears and the Vikings, they're going to suck this year. Their defense is really bad. That's just what it is. But I think the NFC South is kind of intriguing because they have three-win teams. Like, it's kind of funny because last year the NFC South was still up in the air because of how bad all 4 of these teams were.
Mm.
And now it's 3 of them competing for the top spot. I mean, like at any point in time, the Falcons or Saints could overcome the other 2 teams if they just win a game and they get a lucky break with a loss. The Panthers are very clearly the worst team in this division. They got rid of everything like valuable they had except for like Brian Burns, which by the way, absurd that they didn't trade him to the Rams
I
when they
know.
offered
I
two
know.
firsts.
It's crazy.
Terrible decision, but whatever. Maybe they'll probably end up trading at the deadline if we're being honest. But I think Bryce Young has shown flashes of being good. I think he can still prove that he is a good quarterback. I think people are trying to give up on him too early and blame him when it's really the offensive line sucks. The defense is not great. Like it's not his fault entirely. Sure, he hasn't played amazingly, but the Panthers I think are very clearly going to be one of the worst teams in the league, and that's fine, I suppose. I don't know about the Saints. The Saints I think are very clearly the third team. I think the Falcons and Bucks have both shown a little more consistency, which is kind of odd considering how badly Ritter played in London last week. But this week he, got it together. He played decently well in this game, and I think that's important to note. But the Bucks 3-1, Baker Mayfield has played great, and
Yes,
I
he
think the
has.
Bucks are an interesting team. They're intriguing. I think they can make some noise. I think they've weirdly improved from last year somehow. It's
Yeah.
interesting.
No, I agree. I think the defense has been really competitive. I think it's a lot of the same guys from the Super Bowl team, which kind of makes sense. But yeah, I think they look really good. And Baker, it's weird because their O-line has been bad for the run game. Like their run game's pretty non-existent. They were less in the run last year as well. But Baker Mayfield's had time to throw. And the thing about Baker is I guess he's polarizing, but to me, I never really truly gave up on him because he got Cleveland back in the playoffs. He had to deal with the injury, and then they shipped him out after they got Watson. And last year kind of just felt like a fork in the road moment for him. And they were talking about, I think I was listening to Peter Schrager was talking about it on Bill Simmons' podcast that I listened to, but he was talking about Baker. He basically called Tampa and said, "Sign me. I'll compete for your starting quarterback job. You guys have the talent. I can get you guys to be a playoff team." He won the job, and now he's playing arguably better than he ever has. Maybe you could say 2020 he played better. But I mean, Evans and Godwin are still Evans and Godwin. Those are good receivers. I think they're going to win the division. I think Atlanta's right there and could get a wild card spot. The Saints have disappointed me. Their defense is really good, but their offense, I don't know. I like Derek Carr a lot, but I might have just been wrong about him. Now Kamara coming back has given them a bit of a spark. That's another thing though. That might be another coaching situation. I don't know if Dennis Allen, Chris is a Saints fan. He's not happy with Dennis Allen often, so maybe that's part of the problem. But I think I agree with you actually. The Saints will probably get third, and I think they're gonna. It's not gonna be a distant third. They'll be right there for most of the year, but push comes to shove, I just feel like Atlanta all around has a really interesting scheme that they're committed to. And this week with Ritter, they finally got Pitts in London like going. Like he actually was throwing the ball and looked good. I don't know if that's sustainable, but he at least did it this week. And then yeah, I think Tampa is the most well-rounded team in the division, and I think I would pick them to win it right now.
No, I'd agree. I think Baker Mayfield, as you mentioned, like it was weird that so many people were just willing to give up on him. I know that he got traded to the Panthers last season and he was really bad on the Panthers, and I
He
I,
had to
I
deal with
get
Matt
that.
Rule. Like he had to deal with the Matt Rule situation.
Well, also like he also just got like traded from like his team that replaced him with like one of the most polarizing like sports figures of all time at this rate. It's gonna do weird things. But yeah, Baker Mayfield, he's played well. The Bucks have been really good. Todd Bowles, I think, has really proven himself in his second go around as a head coach. Or I guess third, because he was like the Dolphins interim coach for a little bit.
Oh,
But
was I didn't know that.
yeah, he was like our interim coach for half a season and it was like a whole thing. But I think, you know, the Bucks are good. I agree. I think the Falcons are knocking on the door. I think they're close. I think the Falcons, if they continue to keep getting Pitts and London involved, if Bijan continues being as amazing as he is, and Ritter doesn't make any like horrifying mistakes from here on out, the Falcons could make a decent push against the Bucks if they get a lucky break and maybe a Bucks losing streak or something like that. So I
Yeah.
think the top two teams in this division are pretty interesting. I think the
Yeah.
Bucks are clearly the best. But I think the Falcons, if things go their way and they kind of figure things out, they could also be pretty good.
Yeah, I think the thing about Atlanta, you mentioned Ritter. I don't even think I he hasn't been like a turnover machine or anything. It's just that last year as a rookie and then early this season, like in the Packers game, he had no it looked like he couldn't throw the ball down the field. Like he could just check down the whole game. And his stats weren't that bad, but if you watch that game, the Packers were just giving him like 5 yard, dump off throws, and the receivers would get a few extra yards, but some of the games early in the year, he just looked like I was saying bench him for Taylor Heineke because we at least know he'll throw the ball. But the last two games, he's looked like a real quarterback and he's used his legs as well. So maybe Arthur Smith was right about how he wants to use this system. And it just took a few weeks to get off the ground. But I don't know. Like yesterday, they looked like a normal team. So if they play like that, maybe they can be better than Tampa. But I trust Baker more than Ritter at this point.
Oh no, absolutely. I think it more kind of just depends if Arthur Smith can keep this going and continue improving. But that's kind of a big if. I think it kind of depends. I think Arthur Smith has been underrated as like a good coach. I think the fact that the Falcons haven't been great has kind of overshadowed that. But I think Arthur Smith has done good work with this team. And I think they could maybe push for an NFC wildcard spot because I think the NFC is pretty weak this year outside of like the four really good teams. I think everyone else is kind of just like average to below average. So I think there's a lot of really bad teams in this conference to be fair.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think it's gonna be interesting. I think the Bucks, I agree with you, they are the best, but I think it's gonna be an interesting season in the NFC. I think there's a lot of teams who could maybe turn things around if things go their way.
Yeah, wild card wise right now, I think the four teams I'm really looking at would be Dallas, Seattle, and the Rams, and then whoever loses the South between Tampa and Atlanta, and I guess maybe New Orleans. The Packers, I want them to be there. Like I said, I gotta see it. I just want them to put like a normal game together because I don't think they've had a normal game yet. So maybe the
That's
Packers can get in the race as well. But I would say Dallas, Seattle, Rams are probably like my favorite three. But maybe the Rams lose out because of their schedule. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's entirely fair. It's a big thing people forget is that like it really just depends on if you can get a lucky break, a winning streak, a losing streak, someone else loses. Like it's a very variable league. There's a lot of things that go into these things. So it's gonna
Yeah.
be an exciting year, I think.
No, for sure. Just to wrap up, like, what's your sense? We talked a little bit about this with the AFC, but like Super Bowl prediction. I know it's only week 5. There's a lot of games left to be played, a lot of things to happen. I mean, right now, I think you have to say the Niners. I know Eagles fans listening won't be happy, but right now, I think I have to say the Niners, and then I want the Dolphins to get there. I think the Chiefs won't, just because I think it's a year they get unseated. And I don't know. Right now, I think Miami has more momentum than Buffalo, which is weird because Buffalo beat them, but. I don't know. I think Niners, Dolphins. Little, did they ever play in the Super Bowl in the 80s? I feel like they might have once.
Yes, yes, we did. That was I think that was the only Super Bowl Marino played in was he lost to the Niners. So it would be really interesting to see that matchup again.
Yeah. So that's
So
what I think. Do you think that can happen? Are you optimistic in your team?
I think it's in the cards. I don't want to get too excited because I think Miami has some things they need to clean up, but I'm very excited about our future. I think there's hope for us this season. And I think that if they continue what they're doing, continue cleaning up the small mistakes, just like figuring out defensively what they're going to do, I think we need to make a trade defensively. I think we need to bring in a linebacker or defensive lineman, just someone to really bolster that depth. But other than that, I think if they clean up the issues, we could very well see a Niners Dolphins Super Bowl. And I'd love to see it. I think that'd be a great Super Bowl.
Yeah, I think it would be a fresh matchup. It'd be very interesting. So I don't know. Maybe that's what we're gonna get. I would like that a lot more than just even though I don't hate the Chiefs, just the Chiefs again. So we'll have to see how it shakes out. But that's gonna do it for this edition of the fan committee. Mike, I'm glad we were able to, get together and talk some football because we haven't gotten a lot of time to do that so far this year.
Yeah, no, it's always fun to just like kind of just let's discuss it. Let's see what's happening. Let's recap.
Absolutely. So we'll be back at some point in the coming weeks. Maybe we'll let some things play out a little bit more. Maybe close to the trade deadline, take a look at the league again. So that's going to do it for this edition of the Fan Committee. Thank you all for listening today. Make sure to follow on Spotify or subscribe on YouTube if you aren't already. And other than that, have a great rest of your day. I'm excited to see how this NFL season is going to shake out.